Welcome to the Cheating and Love Tales channel. It doesn't mean anything. I tell myself that as I stare at the empty plate on the worn kitchen table. My hands feel like dead weight against the wood, palms sweating. The overhead lamp flickers once, then steadies. Outside, a siren howls in the night. I close my eyes and try to remember how this all began. But my mind circles around a single moment, a single thought. It's not supposed to mean anything at all, is it? Yet it does. I'm standing there, locked in that thought, as if the plate itself is a mirror reflecting everything I've lost. Or maybe everything I'm about to lose. I'm not sure which. My body feels heavier than usual. My shoulders ache. There's a dull, pulsing knot in my lower back that won't go away. Pain slithers into my muscles, stiffening them, making it hard to breathe. Every breath seems to catch halfway, but I force my gaze up at the wall clock. 3:10. Middle of the night. I haven't slept. The last few days have been a smear of confusion, betrayal, and the silent roar of anger building under my skull. I toss the plate into the sink, hearing it rattle, but it doesn't break. The porcelain just spins for a moment. There's something about that spinning that makes my stomach churn. I take a breath and close my eyes, letting myself remember how I got here. Flashback. Discovery 2 weeks ago. I was kneeling beside the backyard fence, pulling out weeds that had grown tall enough to hide the rusted chicken wire. We hadn't done proper yard work in years. My wife and I. Rebecca. We always put it off or hired someone, but that day I decided to handle it myself, maybe as an attempt to break the monotony. That's when my fingertips dug into something solid in the dirt. At first, I thought it was a rock, but it gave under my grip. When I brushed away the soil, I discovered a small tin piggy bank, battered by time. I pulled it out, noticing the faint pink paint peeling away. I shook it gently, and something inside rattled, like thin sheets of paper. My first instinct, maybe old receipts, some random stash from the previous homeowner. But I don't know. Something in the back of my mind tugged at me to open it. So I did. Inside were envelopes. Several, in fact, yellowed with age, corners curled. Each bore a name scrawled in Rebecca's handwriting. The addresses on the front were ours. My heart hammered. My mouth went dry. Then I noticed the sender's address on the back. James Montoya. A name I'd never heard. And yet, the handwriting spelled out my wife's name over and over. I felt a jolt of electricity shoot up my spine, a sharp and sudden tension. A question formed on my tongue, one I couldn't bring myself to say out loud. What the hell are these? I unfolded one of the envelopes, my chest so tight I thought I'd suffocate. The letter inside was short, but reading it was like inhaling broken glass. Words about longing, stolen moments, secret rendezvous. References to last time, and our bodies. My eyes burned with the same anger that now pounds behind my ribs, day and night. I remember sinking onto the grass, gripping that letter in a shaky hand. The neighbor's dog barked somewhere, a plane droned overhead. The world carried on, oblivious. My entire life tilted sideways in an instant. It's nothing, I whispered, but my throat was dry as dust. It has to be nothing. Return to the PREC and I open my eyes and find myself still standing at the sink. My back throbs. The pain is more than physical. In my mind, I see images of her phone, the newly set passcode, the quick dismissals of messages she pretended were spam. Late-night calls from unknown numbers. The letters in that tin piggy bank. That name. James. A man I've never met, yet can't stop picturing in my nightmares. I used to host a cooking show online. Millions of followers tuned in each week. It was my pride. My mother, God rest her soul, taught me every trick in the kitchen, and I turned that into a brand. But after discovering those letters, something inside me shattered. My audience noticed. My posture changed. My jokes lacked warmth. I grew mechanical. I tried to fake it, but the facade cracked. People picked up on the tension. The more they sensed, the more I withdrew. I canceled the cooking segments entirely 2 weeks ago, telling my sponsors it was time for a shift. Now, I've begun a new live stream, one about honesty, about confronting betrayal. The first night I went live, I felt the adrenaline surge like never before. I spoke about trust, about how it can crumble with one lie. My viewers soared beyond my usual counts. Part of me hated it, hated that I was feeding on this suspicion. Another part found twisted satisfaction in exposing the hypocrisy of illusions. I swirl water in the sink, staring at my reflection in the stainless steel. My eyes look haunted. My jaw is tight. There's a scab on my knuckle from punching the fence out back when I lost control the other day. The fence didn't break. My fist nearly did. I think of her face, the way she used to smile when I came back from a long day's shoot, the way she once teased me, calling me chef superstar, proud to be my wife. All that warmth feels alien now, like I dreamed it, or it belonged to a different couple, in a different life. Scene of betrayal. First part, we live in a modest 2-story suburban house in Leh. The open floor plan on the ground level is lined with wide windows that let in bright sunshine. After I found those letters, every time Rebecca left the house, a question battered my mind. Where is she going? Who is she seeing? One evening, 3 days after discovering the tin bank, my suspicion grew unbearable. She said she had to meet a client for an event planning gig. My gut twisted. Instead of trusting her, I followed. I tailed her in my old sit-in, keeping a half-block distance. My heart hammered as she parked near a boutique hotel, the neon sign flickering in the twilight. She got out of the car, checked her phone, then disappeared inside. Every cell in my body screamed. A primal rage welled up in me, mixed with a nauseous dread. I waited a minute, maybe 2. Then I followed. Walking into that polished lobby, I recall the smell of lemon-scented air freshener. A soft jazz tune drifted from hidden speakers. Past the check-in desk, a hallway led to the elevator banks. I ducked behind a column just as she stepped into an elevator, holding a small keycard in her hand. There was a man with her, a man who, from a quick glimpse, looked about my age, maybe a bit younger. Short dark hair, wearing a crisp dress shirt and slacks. He touched the small of her back in an oddly intimate way, guiding her into the elevator. The doors slid closed behind them. Everything turned red. By the time the next elevator arrived, my breaths were ragged. I felt sweat slick my neck. I forced myself in, hardly noticing the others inside. My reflection in the mirrored wall stared back at me, eyes filled with a lethal mix of anger and pain. I watched the floors light up in slow, mocking progression. 4th, 5th, 6th. I got out on the 8th, wandering the corridor. My mind churned. Where was she? I took a chance, followed the hush of voices. They led me to a door left ajar. Room 812. My pulse thundered in my temples. Footsteps, soft laughter, a hush. Then something else. The subtle sound of a deep kiss, like a rush of breath meeting parted lips. My stomach lurched. I pressed forward, just enough to see through the narrow gap. The bed was in clear view, and there they were. Her blouse half unbuttoned, his hand sliding along her waist. She gasped. He murmured something I couldn't catch, but the low hush of desire was plain. She responded with a tilt of her head, pressing closer. I caught a glimpse of her wedding ring, glaring on her finger, just as his lips found her neck. My entire chest knotted into a vise. My vision swam. My breath shook so violently I worried they'd hear me. Part of me wanted to barge in, throw him against the wall, do something, anything, to end that scene. Another part was frozen, pinned by the cruelty of seeing my wife in someone else's arms. She closed her eyes, exhaling a trembling breath. An unmistakable flush colored her cheeks. As his hands traveled upward, she made a soft sound, a desperate moan that shattered every illusion I still clung to. It was erotically charged and horrifying all at once. I felt nauseated, consumed by a betrayal I never thought possible. I couldn't watch another second. I backed away, the door still ajar, leaving them oblivious to my presence. I stumbled down the hallway, my legs half numb. 1,000 shards of agony splintered in my chest. My body tensed up so hard my back spasmed, igniting that pain that would plague me for days afterward. AFT or MAFA of disco V or hours later, well past midnight, I found myself leaning against my car outside the hotel, drenched in a cold sweat. She texted me around 11 p.m., something about the meeting running late. The lie was savage in its simplicity. I started the engine and drove home with the windows rolled down, needing the cool air to keep me awake. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, knuckles white. I replayed the scene in my head, her parted lips, his hand on her waist, her quiet gasp. By the time I reached home, I felt like a raw nerve. I sat in the driveway, engine off, chest tight. Could I confront her now? Rage coursed through me, but something held me back. Fear? Cowardice? Or maybe I needed to plan my next move carefully, methodically. When she arrived, maybe half an hour later, I pretended to be asleep. I heard her tiptoe into the bedroom. I felt the mattress dip under her weight. She sighed, then was still. Flashbacks and growing suspicion. We used to be so in sync. I remember when we first met, at a cooking demonstration I hosted in a local community college. She'd volunteered to assist me on stage. She was wearing a green apron and made a terrible joke about whisking eggs. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the bowl. After the event, we went for coffee. That was 8 years ago. We married a year after that. For a while, everything felt luminous, certain, the kind of love that seems etched in stone. But time grinds down illusions. My cooking show soared in popularity. Her event planning business never fully took off. She was supportive, or so I believed. Sometimes, I wonder if my success overshadowed her. Other times, I suspect it had nothing to do with me. That she just craved something else, something I couldn't give. Days after that night at the hotel, she acted as if nothing happened. She glanced at me with forced cheeriness, like an actress reading from a script. "How's the yard?" she asked over breakfast. "Did you get rid of those weeds?" I stared at her, all too aware of the battered piggy bank I'd found. The letters, that hotel scene. My answers were clipped. She pretended not to notice. At dinner, she told me about her future bookings, some corporate events for a tech startup, a few wedding gigs. She was all polite smiles and small talk. I responded with short, cold truths that I knew had to cut. She would force out a soft laugh, like she was trying to smooth out invisible wrinkles in our air. Meanwhile, my insides churned. That tension built day by day. The pain in my back crept into my shoulders, into my neck, until even my fingertips tingled. Anger stored itself under my skin, waiting for the right trigger. The massage you see last night, she mentioned her shoulders ached from sitting at the computer. She was rubbing her neck, rotating it gently. I looked at her, sensing an opportunity to feel the truth in her body, to see if she would recoil from my touch. "Let me help," I said quietly. She hesitated, eyes flicking up to meet mine. For a heartbeat, I thought she'd decline. But then she nodded. I took her to the living room couch and stood behind her. She wore a thin cotton t-shirt and leggings. My hands pressed on her shoulders, meeting gently at first. She stiffened. I felt her ribs expand with a sudden breath. My touch grew firmer, working the knots in her muscles. She released a small groan of pain and relief. But it didn't feel intimate. It felt like we were both acting, both lying to the roles we once played so effortlessly. My fingers pressed into flesh that felt unfamiliar. Her spine curved forward slightly, as if distancing itself from my palms. A memory flashed in my mind. That man's hands on her waist, his mouth trailing along her neck. My muscles tensed involuntarily. Perhaps I pressed too hard, because she flinched. "What are you doing?" she whispered, turning to glance at me. I just shook my head, forcing a smile. Nothing. Thought you liked deep pressure. She stared a moment longer, then turned away. I resumed the massage, but my heart pounded with unspent anger. I wanted to demand answers, or maybe just scream at her. Instead, I continued the pretense of a caring husband, even though the woman beneath my fingertips now felt like a stranger. The LIVESTREAM today was the day everything finally cracked. I have a new show, a shift from cooking to confrontation. Confronting Trust, or some sensational title like that. The producers said it was raw, captivating. People feed on drama, apparently. And I've got drama in spades. I set up my camera equipment in my home studio. The lights were harsh, the background plain. My reflection appeared on the monitor, stern face, eyes hard. There was a single table before me. On it, I placed the piggy bank, along with the letters. I felt a pulse of rage every time I glanced at them. Just before I went live, I saw her shadow in the hallway. She was half hidden, watching me with anxious eyes. She said nothing, but I sensed her fear. She knew something was about to happen. I pressed the button to go live. My heart hammered, sweat trickled down my spine. The chat feed lit up with thousands of viewers, my old cooking show watchers, plus new faces drawn by the promise of raw emotion. I started speaking, voice calm, measured, like a man reading his own eulogy. Trust, I said. That's what relationships are supposed to be built on. But what happens when you find out trust is just a mask? Viewers poured in. Comments scrolled. People wanted to see the show. They wanted the raw truth. Maybe they smelled blood in the water. The older fans typed supportive messages, confused by the shift in content, but eager to see where it went. I picked up the piggy bank. A relic, I explained. I found it buried by the fence. Thought it was junk. Turns out, it's a time capsule of deception. My throat felt tight. I could almost hear my heart in my ears. A million eyes on me, or so it felt. But in that moment, I only cared about one pair of eyes. Hers. I could sense her presence behind me, trembling. My body tensed, the pain in my back flaring. I pressed on, unstoppable now. I opened the piggy bank and pulled out the letters, one by one. These, I said, voice shaking, are letters from someone I never knew existed. Letters addressed to my wife. Secrets, hidden in our own backyard. I tore one open. Read a few lines. The words about stolen moments, about meeting in hotels, about wanting to taste each other again. My hand shook. I read them out loud, my voice sharp, slicing the air. Thousands of watchers typed furiously. Shock, pity, horror. I could feel them practically salivating. Then I did something that hammered the final nail. I ripped the letters in half, letting the pieces flutter to the table. I grabbed the piggy bank, clenched my jaw, and smashed it against the floor. The ceramic shattered, shards scattering. A raw hush pulsed in my ears. Behind me, a soft gasp. I knew she stood there, mouth open, eyes wide. Maybe she wanted to beg. Maybe she thought she could salvage something. But I didn't give her a chance. I told the camera that I'd never forgive betrayal, that I'd never let lies rot my life again. I ended the live stream with a single cold statement. That's all for now. Next time, we'll talk about how to spot a liar before it's too late. I cut the feed. Confrontation and QOLAPC. She stepped into the doorway as I spun around, her face pale. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes glistened with tears she tried to hold back. She glanced at the wreckage on the floor. Shredded letters, shattered ceramic, my breath heaving in my chest. Finally, she whispered, "Matt, please, let me." I pointed at her with a trembling hand, cutting her off. "Don't say a word." Silence. My voice resonated with a fury that felt foreign. My entire body vibrated. The tension in my spine hit a fever pitch, like a steel rod forced into my vertebrae. My chest felt hot. I wanted to lash out, to spit venom, to break something else. But a cold hush pressed in. I took a step forward, looming in front of her. She shrank back, eyes locked on mine. Why? I ground out, my tone half hiss, half growl. I saw you. With him. Hotel. Room 812. Why? Her mouth opened, tears welling, but I cut her off with a slicing motion in the air. I don't want your excuses, I snapped. You gave me plenty already. You lied. You lied to my face. She inhaled sharply, tears sliding down. She reached for my arm. My reflexes jerked me away like her touch was acid. Seeing her up close, puffy eyes, quivering lip, made me want to, I don't know, break down, smash everything. I felt my chest constrict in an explosion of sorrow and rage. Don't, I muttered. You took away my right to a normal conversation when you brought him into our bed, into any bed, and sold our marriage for cheap thrills. She flinched like I'd slapped her. My breath rattled in my lungs. I pressed my fingertips to my temple, fighting a dizzy wave. That knot of pain in my back flared again, sending stabs up my spine. I could barely stand. The next words came out strangled. You want to beg forgiveness. You think I'll just get over it. You think you can cry and say you're sorry, and I'll welcome you back. A stifling stillness wrapped around us. She shook her head, tears streaming. But no words came. I stared at her for a moment longer, my chest on fire. Then I brushed past her, leaving her in the studio, stepping on shards of the broken piggy bank. The crackle of crushed ceramic underfoot mirrored the sound of my heart splintering inside my rib cage. Silent and I locked myself in the bathroom upstairs, turned the faucet on full blast, and sat on the edge of the tub, pressing my palm to my throbbing back. My reflection in the bathroom mirror was that of a hunted animal. Hollow eyes, lips parted. My shirt clung to me, soaked in sweat. I let the water run, the sound of frantic hiss that drowned out my thoughts. If only I could wash away the images, her with him, her letters, her lies. Minutes bled together. Eventually, I forced myself up, splashed water on my face, and stared at the mirror. It's over, I told myself. She doesn't get a second chance. I wondered if she was still downstairs, crouched amid the wreckage. But I couldn't face her just yet. Fedelash basic. Marriage viodos a memory intruded. Our wedding day, in a small chapel near the beach. My mother was there, beaming, proud to see her only son take this step. Rebecca wore a simple white dress. We exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other in sickness and in health. I kissed her, my heart bursting. Sometimes I think about the naive glow I felt that day, the absolute certainty that we'd stand the test of time. A fool's dream. Or maybe it was real once, and we lost it. I don't know. All I know is that the man I was that day feels like a total stranger now. James's appearance. The next afternoon, while I was in the living room trying to pick up the remnants of the piggy bank, a car pulled up outside. I looked through the blinds and saw him, James Montoya, the man from the hotel. My blood ran cold. He stepped out in a crisp shirt, tie undone, scanning the house with an air of uneasy confidence. Immediately, my body tightened. Pain radiated through my back, as if the memory of him had triggered a fresh spasm. I marched to the front door, yanked it open before he could ring the bell. He met my gaze, eyes flicking with uncertainty. Then, clearing his throat, he said, "I just want to talk." Talk. My voice came out a harsh rasp. You want to talk after you destroyed my marriage. He shifted his weight, hands opening in a defensive gesture. Look, I don't want trouble. I came to see Rebecca. She's not answering her phone. My laugh was caustic. So you show up here. Are you insane? He glanced over my shoulder, presumably looking for her. Matt, right? Liston. I snarled, stepping forward. He froze, reading the fury in my eyes. Don't you dare use my name like we're friends. I said, "Get off my property." He clenched his jaw, a flicker of tension crossing his face. "I'm not leaving until I see her. I need to know she's okay." That single statement set off a detonation inside me. Rage flared so bright that for a moment, I feared I'd black out. "You're worried about her. You're worried about the woman you helped betray me." He took a step back, but his gaze didn't waver. "Look, what happened wasn't planned to go this far. We got caught up. And now she's not responding, so I lashed out, swinging a fist. He dodged, my knuckles grazing his shoulder instead of his jaw. I stumbled, the pain in my back flaring with a white-hot intensity that stole my breath. He grabbed my arm to steady me, and I shoved him off, my lungs burning, eyes blurry with red hatred. "Leave," I wheezed. "Or I swear to God." He raised both palms. "All right. But let her know I tried to see if she was okay." I spat at the ground between us. "She's not your concern anymore. You don't speak to her. You don't look at her. You don't exist." He nodded slowly, lips pressed tight, before turning and walking back to his car. My chest heaved. The sun was blazing overhead. Sweat trickled down my brow. I waited until his car disappeared down the street. Then I went back inside, heart thudding like a war drum in my ribs. Rebecca was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in some corner of the house. A phantom ache settled in my bones. I sank to the couch and dropped my head into my hands, the shattered remains of my life swirling around me. Culmination, pain, and revenge. That evening, I decided enough was enough. My channel's new focus had proven wildly popular. The comments and messages had soared, many urging me to show the receipts, to name names. They wanted the scandal. They wanted the drama. My old sense of dignity wanted to refuse, but bitterness had me in its jaws. So I planned one final brutal episode, a live broadcast that would settle my marriage and bury it. Rebecca approached me after dinner, eyes hollow with sleeplessness. "Matt, about earlier." I cut her off. "I'm going live in 10 minutes. Watch if you want." Her face paled. "You're not." "I am." I walked to the makeshift studio, my spine feeling as though hot needles jabbed it with every step. She followed at a distance, voice trembling. "Matt, please, don't do this. Let's talk privately." "We can." I shot her a glare that froze her mid-sentence. "I gave you every chance. You made your choices." She stood there in silence, tears glimmering on her lashes. But she said nothing more. The final broadcast at exactly 8 p.m. I went live. Thousands poured in. I greeted them with an eerie calm. The chat scrolled so fast, it was a blur. I introduced my wife's betrayal in explicit detail. I didn't name her directly, just referred to her as my spouse. But everyone who'd followed me for years knew who I meant. The horror in their comments was palpable. Then I showed them the remains of the letters. I read from a final letter I hadn't destroyed, describing in lurid phrases the next time James wanted to meet. My voice stayed chillingly steady as I recounted the lines about stolen kisses, nights in plush hotel rooms. I could practically taste the shock on the other side of the screen. I slammed the letter onto the table. "I won't have it," I said in a low, resonant tone. "If you're watching this, you know me. I've always been about authenticity, honesty. And this," I swept my arm across the table, toppling the letter. "This is what a lie looks like." Behind me, I heard a slight rustle. She hovered in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, trembling. Our eyes met, and I saw the final fracturing of whatever remained between us. No words, no explanations. She understood my verdict. "You want to say something?" I asked her, turning so the camera could still see me but not show her face. "Go ahead. Millions of people are listening." She swallowed, stared at me with eyes brimming with tears. Then, her voice small, she whispered, "It was never about hurting you. Her words faltered, died out. She couldn't complete the sentence. I pivoted back to the camera, ignoring her. "I'm done," I said. And for those of you watching, remember, trust dies in silence. Don't ever let someone's secrets stay buried. Dig them up. Expose them. Then crush them before they ruin you. I ended the stream. My final show. Cold, destructive ending. The second the broadcast cut, I felt numbness sweep over me. My back throbbed, a stabbing ache that spread to my shoulders. I bent over, bracing my hands on the table, trying to catch my breath. Rebecca stood there, tears running, face a wreck of guilt and sorrow. I straightened slowly, glaring at her. "Pack what you need," I said in a clipped tone. "Get out." She opened her mouth, but no words came. We stared at each other in a silence that felt absolute, like the end of all things. The heat of my fury cooled into a glacial finality. Shuffling footsteps, she backed away, then turned and disappeared upstairs. I stood in the studio's harsh lights, listening to the fading click of her heels. After a few minutes, I heard her suitcase wheels. She came downstairs, eyes red, and paused by the threshold as though waiting for me to relent. I said nothing. She swallowed, then pulled the door open. The night air drifted in. Without a word, she stepped through and quietly closed the door behind her. I waited, every muscle trembling from a violent swirl of anger, heartbreak, and relief. Once her car engine started and faded down the street, I sank to my knees. My back seized, the pain so intense I gasped. But I welcomed it, let it wash over me like a final punishment. My mouth twisted in a grimace, tears burning the edges of my eyes. Yet I refused to let them fall. She was gone. My wife. The woman I had once adored. Now just a memory soaked in betrayal. I forced myself to breathe until the pain in my spine dulled to an ache. The house felt unbearably quiet. Cold. But maybe that cold was better than living in a lie. I remained there for what felt like hours, kneeling on the floor, hunched over, breathing through the agony. Little by little, the red haze in my mind receded. It left a hollow place in my chest where love used to be. Perhaps that hollowness is another kind of emotion, a chilled space, empty but real. I slowly rose, switched off the studio lights, and let darkness reclaim the room. No tears, no final whispered regrets, just the sound of my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears, a testament to the fact that, somehow, I'm still alive. And so it ends, with me, alone, in this silent house, shards of a shattered piggy bank underfoot, and the cold knowledge that I've destroyed what needed destroying. There is no going back. It's nothing, right? Yes, nothing. At all.